Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this evening's council meeting. I have a motion moved by Dan Armour, seconded by Jason Fitzgerald. Be it resolved that the regular council meeting agenda dated Monday, June 24th, 2019, be adopted as printed and circulated. All those in favor? That's carried. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest with respect to this evening's agenda? Councillor Withing.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a pecuniary interest with item number 6.2.4 and 8.2.15, 8.2.16, and 8.2.17 for business reasons.
Okay, the clerk has that. So noted. Thank you. Anyone else for being here? Obviously in support of this great staff we have here from the district as well, Mr. Yon. Mitchell, thank you. Okay, we are going to get right into it. We have invited and ceremonial presentations, and the first one we have is we get to hand out the Bill Award, and it's as it turns out, no surprise who it is this year. It's already been announced in the media, it looks like, and this year the recipient. So those of you who don't know, I should get into this a little bit before I sort of announce the winner. The Bill Award is something that we created at the end of the Decade show at Deerhurst. For many years it ran as the Vegas show, and then the Sing show, and then the Decade show. And Bill Waterhouse, always, he was a founder of obviously bringing great talent to the community, and was a big fan of that kind of performing arts. And of course, we all know Shania Twain had her stint there before she became huge and famous and all that stuff. So at the end of that, I was there and felt compelled that we should do something to honor the legacy of Bill Waterhouse and, of course, the performing arts in our community. And so, realizing that I am clearly no judge of great talent, we have a jury that actually adjudicates this, and it is awarded to a performing artist. And so, this year the jury was Carol Gibson, Jennifer Johns-Main, and Ian McTavish. And the recipient, the winner this year, is none other than Sarah Spring. Sarah, come on down. You have to have your picture taken with me.
Okay,
As long as you're okay with that.
So there we go. Thank you.
You want to say anything to Brad?
Thank you very much. Yeah, great. It's a very honored. Thank you.
So the other presentations we have this evening, many of you will recall for the last few years we had a contest running in the elementary schools in Huntsville, and we called it Help Decorate the Mayor's Office Art Contest, because when Claude left, he sold all his furniture because he built it himself, and so there's nothing on the walls, nothing in the room. So it was a bit barren in there, and we figured we needed to do something. And my niece painted me this beautiful little picture of the town hall. I framed it, put it up on the wall, and that's what gave me the idea to get young people to decorate my office. So when we put the call out, we were getting fewer and fewer submissions for Help Decorate the Mayor's Office. And thanks to Terry Suter, we came up with another idea. And so now we're doing a public speaking contest. And so we held the first public speaking contest, the Mayor's Public Speaking Contest, and it was really, really hard. We had 12 entrants. Deputy Mayor Terziano and Councillor Wiebe and I had to judge these, and we fought a lot when it came to the actual tallying up of the numbers, because it was very difficult. We really struggled with it, because they were all exceptional. The theme this year was what I love about Huntsville. And they were all excellent, excellent speeches, and we heard some great things about Huntsville. One of the other things we heard was a couple of things we need to do better, which is good about Huntsville too, because you got to be honest. You'd probably be surprised to hear that people complained about the roads a little bit. I can't imagine why, but anyhow. So we're pleased to announce the winners. We couldn't, and as you can see, we could not come up with three first, second, third place. We actually have a tie in third place. And so in third place in a tie, we have Carolyn Youngblood from Spruce Glen Public School, grade 7. And her teachers are Mr. Dietrich, Mrs. Higgs, and Mr. Wilson. Is Carolyn here? There she is. Carolyn, come on down. We're going to have you come down here, and I'm also going to have Natalie Yushak come down from St. Mary's Catholic School in grade 7 as well. So we have a tie for third place. Withy needs a smack. Okay, and in second place, we have Margot Fleming from Huntsville Public School, grade 6. Her teacher is Miss Steinberg. Where's Margot? Come on down, Margot. Okay. And the first place winner of the 2019 Mayor's Public Speaking Contest goes to Kira Marshall of Riverside Public School, grade 7. So we want to get one with everybody now, if we can. So just so you know, the winner, Kara, will be also delivering her speech, her winning speech at the Canada Day festivities on July 1st at Muskoka Heritage Place at 10 a.m. So Kara will be joining us there, which means I better brush up on my speech, make sure I do a good job. So we'll look forward to seeing you there. Okay? Thanks, everybody. That's great. Oh, that's nice. I was going to go. I almost skipped right over you there, Fred. See that? So excited. Here's another page. We rehearsed this and everything, and I still messed it up. We'll give everyone a second to file out. Thanks, Sarah. Bye. So the next item on our invited and ceremonial presentations is actually from Fred Yon, who's the Commissioner of Engineering and Public Works, and Andrew Guthrie, Manager of Solid Waste of the District of Muskoka. Those are the only official names I have on here. What are you doing? Just hanging out? You're welcome to come down too. Anyhow, Fred and Andrew, come on down, and we look forward to your presentation. I assume you'll be using the screen? Yeah, okay. I'll get out of the way. Welcome.
Done? Thank you, Your Worship. It's always great to come to Huntsville Council. Hard act to follow with that, but that was fun. Andrew Guthrie, of course, beside me, our Manager of Solid Waste, and Quinn doesn't need an introduction, I don't think, but she's been a big part of the whole solid waste file. So here to have a high-level discussion on a vision and strategy for solid waste. And just want to start off with talking about the provincial regulations that are a big part of driving the change in solid waste file. No doubt you've heard about the Waste-Free Ontario Act. It's significant legislation in the Wynne government that contemplates reducing the amount of waste that's generated in the province, ultimately to zero. You may also have heard of the Extended Producer Responsibility Act, which we'll talk about in more detail. The Ford government came in and basically didn't make any significant changes in solid waste. They rebranded it. They called it Made in Ontario Environment Plan. But basically, it's founded on the same principles. What we're looking forward to now is what's called the upcoming Blue Box regulation, which is going to discuss sort of the next changes and involvement of the Blue Box program. And, you know, there was just a cabinet shuffle last week in provincial government, and I'm hoping that's not going to stall out the change that Minister Phillips has been taken out of the environment portfolio. And going back to Ontario Council, Chair Klink did address Council last October and discussed the importance of looking at the solid waste file. Clearly, it was a topic of discussion in the public during the last election. And so, you know, all these drivers, plus now the federal government is wading into the file. The Prime Minister has announced there will be changes to the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, which they'll look at rethinking what's called single-use plastics, clearly an environmental problem in Canada and beyond. So what does this all mean for Muskoka? Well, I think it means looking at level service changes for sure, and we'll talk about some of the ones that we're proposing. Cost implications as well, both on the positive and negative side. I see a lot of opportunity for cost reduction under our current program, so a lot of the things that we're bringing forward tonight will reduce costs. At the same time, looking at service level alternatives will offset some of those costs. Ultimately, we're trying to reduce the environmental footprint in Muskoka. There is a big disconnect between people understanding what the waste file has to do with environmental outcomes, but they're very significant. Like, just look at the landfill alone. The generation of greenhouse gases, methane gas, a big problem in the climate change file. And one of the things we're ultimately trying to achieve is extending the life of a landfill. Like, that is a scarce resource. I would predict that in 20 years, it would cost a lot of money to replace it. The longer we can make that landfill last, the less we have to put in our reserve funding for the future. So these are all the impacts and outcomes for Muskoka. So the foundation really for all of this legislation, mostly in the Waste-Free Ontario Act, is to reduce the amount of waste that's created in the first place. And you've heard of the 4 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle, recover. you know, that's a big part of the strategy, so that the end result, what we dispose of in a landfill or elsewhere, becomes less and less and less. I wanted to share with you statistically where we're at in Muskoka and how that compares to where the province wants to be in 30 years. Let me start by saying waste should be 1/3, your blue box, with the blue obviously, 1/3, and kitchen organics also 1/3. In today's environment, they should be equally split. So you can see what we're landfilling is about 54%, so about 20% higher than it should be. Our Blue Box program, I think, has been quite successful in Muskoka. Probably still opportunities for improvement, but I think the promotion and education over the years has really paid off. And the big opportunity you can see in the green there is the kitchen organics is only at 11%. That should be at least 20% higher. So where the province wants to head ultimately in 30 years, 40% on Blue Box, 40% on organics, and only 20% in disposal. So these statistics, overall, Muskoka is sitting at what's called 45% diversion rate in the province. The leading municipalities are between 60 and 70%, and I think we can achieve that if we put our minds to it. In terms of looking at service level changes, the starting point, I think, is looking at the Green Bin program. And many people aren't aware that the Waste-Free Ontario Act bans organics from landfills. As I mentioned, putting organics in the landfill not only creates this leachate gas, leachate liquid, which is difficult to treat, but it also generates methane gas. We're trying to get our organic stream up to 1/3. So if we accomplish that, we automatically extend the landfill life by 1/3 as well. How do we do that? We start by looking at our bag limits. Our bag limits are too high, and as long as we offer that alternative for people not to use the Green Bin program, then some of them won't. We've looked at the participation rates of the Green Bin program here in Huntsville, and we found the participation rate to be relatively low. And if you take a drive around a collection day, you'll see that not everybody has a Green Bin program, green bins out. And if you look at, well, if you could look at what's in their green bins, you'll see that there could be a lot more in. Basically, they should all be full. I was very pleased that previously the town already discussed looking at extending the Green Bin service outside of the urban area. I think you've been a leader in Muskoka and really, really pleased. We want to bring that discussion forward. And we'll be talking about bin sites further, but this is one of many reasons why bin sites will be eliminated in Muskoka. Looking at our Blue Box program, I mentioned that I think our overall diversion rate is good. That the changing global situation has made it very challenging to process and dispose of it and recover the cost of the Blue Box materials. Contamination now is a big driver of change. Contamination means that residents aren't always separating the waste into the proper streams, or if it's contaminated with, if fibers are contaminated with oils or organics, then they have to be landfilled. They can't be used. We find at curbside our contamination rate is low. At our transfer stations, there's some opportunities for improvement, but at our unstaffed bin sites, truthfully, the contamination is so high that we have to landfill about 80% of what we recover in recycle. It's really unfortunate. Reducing bag limits will continue to encourage diversion. What we think the province will be driving as we transition to the producers looking after the Blue Box program, they're going to rethink the acceptable materials that are in the Blue Box program. I think the number of materials will change. It'll reduce because ultimately they're going to be responsible for all the costs of the Blue Box program. We in Muskoka staff want to start looking at that as well, because we can see at a recycling facility in Bracebridge, some materials just are too difficult to process and they don't have any in markets. There just isn't isn't a business case for it. So this concept of transitioning to the producers, basically it means that the Walmarts, the Unilevers, the Loblaws, the people that generate packaging materials in Ontario and beyond will be fully responsible for the entire program. And that's a huge upside for Muskoka. We're currently only funded about 44% of that cost of the program. they'll completely have to fund it, they'll have to be completely responsible for all aspects of it. We're anticipating that that transition will happen in the next 3 to 5 years. And, the upside of having that money freed up, obviously it makes it available for other things or reducing taxes. I'd like to make a case for reducing the bag limits in Muskoka. We know that even a large family can easily manage on 1 bag per week. It's been proven time and time again across the province. It's been proven by many in Muskoka as well. It's not unfair. It's entirely doable. For those people at the urban areas that have green bin service, we propose that this fall we drop it by 1. For those people that don't have green bin service, we go from 3 to 2, again dropping it by 1. And the same at our transfer stations. Again, this will be the fundamental driver to increase waste diversion. And we do want to implement it with a targeted P&E campaign this fall. At our unstaffed sites, we have no ability to enforce any of the bag limits. One option to make this more acceptable that you can consider is bag tags. And so bag tags allow more flexibility. We do get pushback from seasonal residents saying that it's unfair, that we pay a lot of taxes, we're only up here so many months of the year. By giving everybody the same number of bag tags per year, it addresses that concern. It's also another tool where we can reduce the amount of bag tags that are allowed year after year, so that you're slowly reducing the entitlement of bag tags, which helps extend the life of the landfill. Staff are a little bit concerned that we wouldn't want to see people putting 20 bags out a week, but because they're seasonal residents. So there's probably ways that we'll have to address those kind of loopholes. Another tool that we want to put forward next year is have a bylaw in place that spells out all aspects of the program. Doesn't make this a voluntary activity. It signals the importance of waste diversion for the Muskoka. It clearly would have to address illegal dumping, which is a big problem across Muskoka. We're appealing to the area municipalities and requesting bylaw enforcement for solid waste. At the district, we don't have bylaw departments. Does it really make sense for us to hire bylaw people and allocate those costs? I would think that the starting point would be to talking to all the area municipalities to see if we can make that work, and so we have. So this brings us to one of the biggest challenges we've had in Muskoka. These are the unstaffed bin sites. We have about 92 of them across Muskoka. They are illegal. They have always been illegal. Due to public pressure, we've been very challenged at district to eliminate them. We've been in discussion with the Ministry of the Environment, and they are putting their foot down on it. And so they've given us until April 2023 to phase them out. We have to come forward with an abatement plan to them by September of 2019. I think this is doable. And, even if it wasn't regulated by the ministry, I can point out that there isn't any aspect of our waste management program that actually works for the bin sites. High contamination, illegal dumping, enforcement of bag tag. There isn't any part that we can make work. We've been trying for years. Muskoka is too big. It's just too unmanageable. So there's 4 alternatives for service level to address that. Extending the curbside collection routing where possible, building new staff transfer stations, or building waste depots, which are a form of a bin site, but they're supervised, they're built to a set of construction standards, and they were granted approvals by the ministry with a set of rules to go with them. Or we can also redirect residents to existing waste disposal sites. In Huntsville, we currently have 16 sites. Some of them are seasonal, some of them are year-round, as you can see in front of you. I'm going to let Andrew talk about the alternatives for eliminating bin sites and some of the options that we have. Sure.
Yeah, so firstly, this is just a overview map of all the bin sites that are in Huntsville. They're color-coded for year-round, summer, and winter sites. So the first area that we've looked at is just east of Mary Lake in that area. We do have an old transfer station on Brunel Road that we would contemplate maybe putting a depot in there that would be, staffed during certain hours, and people that don't receive curbside collection and have been using these bin sites would all be redirected to this site or to one of our transfer stations. And then on the west side of Mary Lake, we've got a similar idea of close those bin sites. But that red dot up at the top, that's actually Medill Church Road, where we're proposing to put a new transfer station there. Now that Stisted is no longer a landfill, it's pretty far out and it's inconvenient for most residents to travel there. And then just south of Port Sydney, we've actually got an old landfill site there that we would actually look at creating another waste depot at that site and then be able to close those bin sites to that residents that don't get curbside collection currently use. And then north of Huntsville, we didn't really see any good options for a transfer station, but we've been looking at these areas and we're investigating making some changes to our curbside collection program, possibly get an agreement for road maintenance. We're working with our contractor on some specialized vehicles to maybe be able to travel some of these smaller roads.
A big part of this discussion is having a community engagement plan. We recognize that the significant change that we're recommending. Much like we've done on the King Williams Street project, we're trying very hard to advance our engagement with the public. We'll have presentations with them directly to get their feedback. We'll use our website and various technologies. I think it'll model very similar to the King William project that you've seen, and I think it's been very successful so far. I have Quinn here, who's be a key part of driving that program, and she can certainly take any questions that you may have. Just a high-level discussion on levy allocation. Basically, every municipality is allocated the cost for the services that you're provided with. Every area has a different service level. Go to the next slide. You can see sort of what the cost allocation works out. On the right side of the chart, we have cost per unit per household as low as $100 per household and as high as $179. And Huntsville is sort of in the middle at about $156. So, there are a lot of efficiencies. The Lake of Bays is the cheapest model. They don't have any curbside collection. They don't have any bin sites. They have transfer stations. We recognize that Muskoka is unique and every municipality has its own desire for a program that works for them. I want to point out that there is opportunities for cost savings. I'm going to turn this one over to you since I'm losing my voice anyway. So.
So, as I said earlier, we're proposing a new transfer station on Medill Church Road. So here's just a list of other sites that we had proposed. We reviewed them with a consultant and staff at the district, and we just found that Medill Church Road was probably the best site that we have. It's currently a town yard. There's also a Fowler's operation down there, so the area is used to the big trucks and the more traffic. It's fairly central to Huntsville. It's not far off the highway. It's convenient for hauling from the transfer station to the Murph in Bracebridge or to the landfill, which is also in Bracebridge. So this is just an overview. That red box that you see there, that is town property or town-owned property, and we would propose putting the transfer station kind of in the bottom right corner of that block. So it would be the first thing when you turn down the road. It would be before you get to the town yard.
So we've thrown a lot of information at you tonight. I appreciate that. If we can determine next steps and how we can advance on these conversations, that would be certainly appreciated. Happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions from council, starting with Councillor Alcott, because I was looking that way first, and I'm looking over here.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you both for a really interesting presentation. You may have said it, but I missed it if you did, which is, when are you anticipating the closing of the bin sites? So the public process needs to happen, and what you're thinking as to that next phase.
Through you, Your Worship, the Ministry of Environment requires that we have all the bin sites phased out by April 2023. And so we want to prioritize that. There's some low-hanging fruit that we can address, and there'll be some tougher decisions that require alternative levels of service to be in place. For example, extending curbside collection or building some of the proposed waste depots in the transfer station will take some time. And so we have to act very aggressively to make this happen.
Councillor Weeb and then Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, can you tell me a bit about getting the data for the organics diversion? Because the number seems very low, and I'm just wondering how that data is collected. Is it simply by seeing who's got a bin at the end of the other curb?
Go ahead.
So all municipalities in Ontario have to file their total statistics for all forms of waste with the province annually. So, we track the total amount of waste diversion, which really forms the basis for how we're funded the Blue Box program. So it's an average across all of Muskoka that I presented tonight. It may vary from area municipality to area. We don't have details of that, but we did do a survey just in Huntsville that I talked about that. We know that participation rate is low. We think that's probably a common denominator all across Muskoka, though.
Councillor Whitting? Thank you, Worship. Couple of things. Through your presentation, I was sort of trying to add up sort of between carrots and sticks, and I was hoping to see more carrots than sticks, but I understand it has to be some of each. My other comment was, you mentioned the blue box contamination. And if you could sort of solve an ongoing argument in my household, is it something that goes in that shouldn't be there, or how clean does the peanut butter jar actually have to be?
Why don't you go ahead with the last one? The blue box contamination.
Through you, Your Worship. It's a combination of both. Any organics, food that's left on containers, or pizza boxes get greasy, that's a big problem. But it's also the material going into the blue box that shouldn't be in there. It's basically grocery store packaging is what you're looking to recycle. Anything else, even though you think it's recyclable, it's not. As Fred said, the bin sites are kind of our worst offenders. Those things are bad. But because of the way that's collected, everything's put into one truck. So when one person does something extremely bad, it could potentially wreck the whole load.
You brought up another, thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. You brought up another question. We have like a family cottage that families from different areas of Ontario come to, and there's always a debate there about things that go in their municipal blue box that we don't allow, or they look at something I put in mine, they go, what do you can't put that in there? And it's like, well, yeah, I think I can. So uniformity, I think, would be a great thing, especially with so many seasonal residents coming up, because they're going to throw stuff in there that they may be able to throw in Mississauga that you guys don't want. I don't know how to solve that, but anyway.
There's an answer to that problem too, and I'm not going to give it to you right now.
If I can just address the carrots and sticks conversation that you're asking about. So I think the carrot is environmental outcomes.
And we need to do a good job explaining what those really mean, because I understand that that's where part of the disconnect is. You know, we're all about trying to deliver public services at the lowest cost, and I think there's some huge inefficiencies currently that will have good outcomes. You know, if we get this right in Muskoka, it will save money. There's some offsets to that, but you know, I think we'll be demonstrating to the public that we are acting responsibly fiscally and on the environmental front. You know, the sticks are, it's hard to get people to change, right? But I think that's where the public consultation and explaining this will be so important. I think that's becoming a strength for the district, that we recognize the importance of that. Will we please everybody? No. You know, but I think the bulk of people will understand that we're doing this for environmental and fiscal reasons, and as well as provincial compliance.
The issue of different municipalities being able to accept different things in their recycle bin, can you speak to that, though? It's just it's a question of how our contractor is able to sort things, is it not?
Yes, it is. In the larger areas, a lot of their processing plants have more automation, optical sorters, so they actually can accept less plastics than what we can up here, because we're a manual sort operation. But with all the talks about the Waste-Free Ontario Act, the province is actually considering making a province-wide standard on what's acceptable in the blue box, which should eliminate all that confusion as people travel between municipalities.
Deputy Mayor Truziano.
Thank you, Your Worship. Two questions, one blue box, one green bin. So I live in a subdivision that has green bins, and you're absolutely right, there's some households that don't put them out. Do you do anything about identifying them, and I mean your truck drivers, I guess, that, you know, these addresses aren't using them, and make any follow-up contact to maybe see why?
We haven't done any follow-up to find out why people aren't using it, but we have had our contractor go in and do a count in certain areas on what the green bins were. When was that? Last fall? Yeah, it was last fall that they did that count for us.
And I guess on the blue boxes, I know I've been blue boxing for a long time, and I think I know what goes in them, but everything I read in the news and hear these days, nobody's putting the right stuff in the blue box. So what about a new education program about what goes in and what actually doesn't go in, maybe? I mean, we used to have a little tag years ago, I think, that came out, but I don't know if there's been any updates.
Our Blue Box program hasn't changed. We're proposing that it changes. It really hasn't evolved significantly over recent years. We can continue to do promotion education. We're surprisingly finding that some people don't always understand it, and it is complicated. So that's good feedback that we'll take back and continue to work on. I think it's going to change ultimately in the next few years, and as that changes, there'll have to be more promotion and education to make sure people understand those changes.
Councillor Schumacher.
I attended a Rotary meeting, I believe, and Quinn did a really good presentation on blue box delivery. I believe there's a website you can go in and pretty much type in anything that you have in your household and see where it goes. Is that correct? Is it still in the works?
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Further to that, and bringing Quinn into the conversation, Quinn developed that incredible app, and I'm just wondering if the municipalities around Muskoka have been made privy to it, and it was on the Muskoka site, and it was really intelligently and well done, Quinn. Has it been available to all the municipalities around? It has been? Okay. Second question I have had to do with the Ontario mattress recycling program. Could you refresh me, how many mattresses a year did we find were going into the landfill site, Andrew? Was it 8,000? Is that right?
Actually, it was just about 10,000.
Just about 10,000 mattresses a year. And so the resulting impact of the mattresses is, you know, they compact, but then of course the springs are there, so come back up, so it takes up a lot of volume in the landfill. Question I have, though, that was sort of I guess one that, when you think about it, is pretty obvious. There's a lot of metal in a mattress and so on and so forth, so there's value in recycling those. Is there anything else that we could be looking at on a large scale like that could be diverted, such as the OMR program?
I'll start with that one. I think we focused on the residential program. The other half of waste in Canada is what's called IC&I, industrial, commercial, and institutional.
Right.
So like all the construction bins that come in, you know, separation of wood from steels and other materials, I think that's the next big opportunity that we want to tackle. It's a big file to reform solid waste, and so we're tackling it one step at a time. I think that's the biggest opportunity. There's lots of other opportunities that will evolve themselves where, you know, things are not recycled, but they're reused. You know, we need to look at all aspects of our program. That's gaining sort of prominence in Ontario. Again, this is a big thing to tackle, and we're kind of focusing on the key elements. You're absolutely right that there's lots of other opportunities. We're trying to deal with the low-hanging fruit, though, and tackle the big issues and get that underway, and then continuously evolve this program.
Go ahead.
Further to that, then, thank you for that, Brett. Further to that, then, I mean, the province has now come up with manufacturers becoming responsible for the cost of recycling plastics and so on and so forth. Would legislation from the province help if manufacturers or contractors were required to pay for or look after the recycling of those drywall and stuff like that comes into the landfill?
So the province does have regulations to transition the Blue Box program to the producers. Where the Waste Free Ontario Act does cover a lot of aspects of residential waste. I think the weak point is that they haven't really addressed the industrial, commercial, and institutional category. For example, like restaurants, all these organics, they're still going into landfills, like private landfills. That needs to be tackled as well. Like, they're kind of focusing on municipalities, but this is just a big, big problem that, you know, I think even the province is taking it step by step.
Thank you.
Councillor Emmer.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question. I was wondering, have you ever thought of going to the clear plastic bags from the green plastic bags? You can see who's not throwing the garbage where it should be or not recycling?
Yes, we have, and that's certainly an opportunity for the town to consider. You know, some municipalities feel that that's an intrusion of privacy. Like, everybody has a different perspective on it. We know Kawartha Lakes did that, and they had significant good results, you know. So I don't think we have to have the same approach everywhere in Muskoka. Preferably we would, but, you know, if the town is receptive to that, we certainly could act on that.
Councillor Weed.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm wondering if we would consider going one step further, and rather than issuing bag tags, we issue bags with the addresses on them.
Okay, I haven't heard that.
No, I mean, the taxpayer pays for everything in one way.
Councillor, it's okay. We're going to get an answer to your question. No need to debate with Councillor Whitley right now. He whispered in your ear and he took the bait. Go ahead.
Through you, Your Worship, we haven't considered that greatly, but there are other municipalities that have done that. I don't know that they've put addresses for specific properties or anything, but it's been a bag. I think most of the time it's been a clear bag, but it's had like the municipal logo or something like that on it. And then just further clarification on the clear bags. That's really an enforcement tool if we have a mandatory diversion bylaw. So that would give our collection drivers the opportunity to look in the bag and say, no, that's too much recycling.
Okay. Change is coming. Good stuff. Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much for being here, answering all those questions.
Thank you.
And the discussion will continue. And thank you for being here too, Gwen. And thank you, Chair Klink, for watching over them, making sure they behave themselves. Okay, we're moving on to deputations, and our only deputation is Kevin Trimble, who's Chair of the Muskoka Watershed Council, and he's going to go through the Muskoka Watershed Council update with us. Kevin, as always, welcome to Huntsville.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to give an update. This talk was developed as a general update for all of our local municipalities. We've been delivering it through the spring, but it was developed before the flood. So I think I'm going to just spin through some of the general update slides fairly quickly so that I can get to spend a couple minutes on our hydrology project, if I could. And there's three main aspects of our mandate that are relevant to what I'm going to speak about. We develop science-based programs to help us understand the watershed and the risks and the management options. We develop evidence-based policy positions for you, and we do a lot of outreach to help the community make better informed decisions. When you think of it, when Muskoka started, there was a very simple, easy to understand, direct relationship between the economy and the environment. And even though our local economy has changed significantly and is much more complex now, that link and that interdependence are still essentially the same, especially now as we see the effects of climate change kicking in. What distinguishes MWC for this kind of thing is that we have representation from almost every corner of the community. We continue to have really good access to volunteer experts and scientists around the area, and we have a great relationship with MOE Dorset as well. Oops, sorry. We continue to get a great deal of support from the District of Muskoka, and especially with staff, including Christy Doyle and Rebecca Willison, who I think many of you have encountered here a bunch of times. And locally, Mayor Aitchison and Councillor Alcock have been great supporters of MWC. The executive is currently composed of 4 community members and 4 district councillors, including Councillor Alcock from Huntsville, Councillor Edwards from Muskoka Lakes, Councillor Papard from Lake of Bays, and Councillor Wianco from Georgian Bay. And then we also have representation on our general council from Bracebridge, Gravenhurst, Seguin, and Algonquin Highlands, covering the entire watershed. Because we have the unique governance model that we have, we seem to have increasing success in the last few years with getting grants. And what's unique about it is that we can get grants that are available only through municipalities, but also grants that are only available to NGOs. And I think our entire community stands to gain from that in the long run. In spite of the fact that our watershed report card is not a part of a comprehensive watershed plan, and it can't help us predict floods very well, we're still finding we're getting great success and uptake, and it's a great educational tool for raising awareness in the community. So this is our latest one that was issued last summer, and I think we were in speaking with you about that. Of our recent initiatives, a key one that is that the climate change study we did in 2016 led to the hiring of the district's first climate change coordinator. And now we're using a lot of the information and returning to that study all the time in looking at watershed planning and hydrologic issues. Ironically, we'd been planning our biennial stewardship conference for months around the theme of watershed. And it just so happened to land on one of the rainiest days right in the middle of the flood here in Huntsville. The upside being that Mayor Aitchison was close by and able to come and speak at it for us. And it was a successful event. We had a lot of great dialogue and outside experts talking with us around the subject of how the watershed produces natural infrastructure and natural capital that we depend on for our economy here. Another irony that hit us this year is that the MWC had been easing into a watershed hydrology project through last winter. And combined with the planning for the stewardship conference, we were already set up with a team of people thinking about this kind of stuff before the flood actually hit, before we knew it was coming. And we do have other projects on the go. Key ones are that we've started an algae monitoring project in collaboration with 3 lake associations, the MLA and MOECP Dorset, to do pilot studies and test some new technologies for monitoring. And we're also active participants in the district's road salt working group. But the urgency that we've sensed with respect to the aftermath of the flood is that many people seem to be only hearing one message, and they're demanding the wrong thing, particularly in the media and through lobbying group social media. And until the province comes out with some kind of specific plan of attack, the MWC will keep trying to get the message straight. We know that there's an immediate, urgent need for money and support to help people in need and to repair and rebuild. But when it comes to looking at the bigger picture or longer term solutions, the science is telling us pretty clearly that focusing exclusively on the Muskoka River Water Management Plan alone or new flood-proofing technologies alone will not help us. Not only will that not solve the problem for flooding, but if we install some flood control measures without considering things like future water quality in the lakes, the receiving environment, or other environmental and economic issues, we're going to make things even worse. Our forest resources, as an example, and also our wetlands, our headwater areas, and our own backyards for human land uses all play a major role in how water moves through the entire watershed. And by only looking at dams or water levels and some snow depth numbers, we're only considering a small piece of the pie. So we were the only NGO at the Premier's task force meeting in May. And we've been reaching out to all area politicians to tell you that there are much better and more comprehensive tools available to help Muskoka move forward in an uncertain future. Collectively, we have the ability here to form a multi-stakeholder roundtable to develop a watershed management strategy that could include not only how dams and lake levels are managed, but would also put those actions into the context of the broader management strategies and tools and infrastructure across the entire watershed. The watershed planning process is a transparent and inclusive one, and it allows us to consider where and how floods start, the management options we have, and it allows us to develop flood management infrastructure in the context of broader socioeconomic and ecological realities and opportunities and goals in the watershed. So we're trying our very best to educate people and correct the message. And we're going to be bringing out, we've already been involved fairly heavily with the media this spring, but we're going to be bringing out some more technically oriented pieces, hopefully bringing street level from all of the detailed science. And we know a number of you understand this in this room, but we're really looking for your support to continue to get the correct message out to people before the province weighs back in. So I didn't get into any detail at all, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Great report. I'll go to the table. If there are any questions from anyone? Councillor Weed.
Thank you, Your Worship. So you touched on water control, dams. I think that's been on everyone's mind this last spring. How much control do we actually have upstream from here? Could it be part of the solution, or is it simply a red herring to look at greater control with dams?
It's a great question to ask someone like me, because I'm not a hydraulic engineer or water resources engineer. So the answer that we feel strongly about is there is merit in looking at how we're managing water going over the dams and lake levels. But the point is that we should really be doing that in the context of what else is happening in the watershed. And there's a general sense that we're already near the limit of what we can do with the dams and the reservoir effects of all of the lakes. And we're probably not going to solve a flooding problem. And it's almost like treating symptoms at this point, because the water's already coming down the river when you're looking at changing how the stop logs in dams operate. But we haven't looked at the natural infrastructure and potentially other built forms of infrastructure up at the top of the watershed in all of the headwater areas, like our wetlands, the small headwater streams that nobody thinks about. The fact that our forest resources pump almost half of our annual precipitation back up into the atmosphere again, so that forest management becomes a factor in all of this too. So it's really thinking broadly enough and look at all of the resources we have, not just a couple of them at the bottom end.
Councillor Alcock.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Kevin, for that presentation. Just a very quick question. I was hoping you might remind all of us as to the status of the $5 million commitment from the province from last fall that was supposed to go to Muskoka's watershed management planning.
At the Premier's Task Force meeting on May 17th, one of the mayors asked our MPP, Norm Miller, about that, and Norm was very emphatic in saying that fund is still working its way through the MOECP bureaucracy, and that task force meeting was organized by MAH, or for MAH and the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, so two different ministries attacking the bigger problem across the province. So,
Councillor Thompson and Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Kevin. You mentioned that there were alternatives to creating reservoirs and dams and that kind of thing. Could you elaborate a little bit more on some of the alternatives that you said we should be looking at, as opposed to just that part of it?
when you look at the entire watershed, and particularly when we get up into the headwater areas, there's areas of land that we're converting land uses on, and we should be looking at how those land uses are being done. And a really simple example would be our management of wetlands and what we're doing with wetlands. The existing wetlands have a role in attenuating floods, and their ability to do that is going to change as climate change continues to warm things up, because evapotranspiration and vegetation and all that kind of stuff is going to change. But if we do the right kind of watershed-wide modeling rather than just river hydraulic modeling, we can look at the role of those wetlands and how much they're actually attenuating, and if there's merit in putting more effort into protecting the existing ones, or even merit in building more of them in different parts of the watershed. And different parts of the watershed will have a different ability to function in flood protection. And it won't probably solve the entire problem, but it would be one more little piece. And when you think of the forest reserves, the wetlands, and the headwater area, and then also all of our existing built infrastructure, there's lots of opportunities to do things further up in the watershed if we put everything in the right context.
Thank you, Your Worship. We just saw the province had decided not to plant, I don't know how many, 10 million trees or whatever this year. Should we be planting more trees? Would that be a part of the solution?
In areas where we don't have them, absolutely, and we know we've got several rampant forest tree diseases right now with invasives related again to climate change. So we are going to have to rethink, because the habitat is actually changing. And so the habitat preferences for tree species like pine trees is shifting, and the trees are going to want to be further north, just hypothetically, in any tree species, but they won't be able to get there. And we may actually have to intervene with some active management on that front when we look out over, a few decades from now. But the problem is serious enough that's the kind of thing that.
Thanks, Gary. Councillor Willie.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you for your presentation. I guess it sort of got me thinking about the bigger picture, because you mentioned dealing with symptoms, and here we've had our second 100-year storm in 6 years. There's a lot of stuff going on out there that's way out of our control, that in a lot of respects, our part of the world isn't as responsible for. I mean, the headwater issue, most of the headwaters that come through this way are in Algonquin Park that aren't getting developed at all. And I'm not trying to, I'm just interested to, are you thinking of the big picture as well as what's happening with our forests and rivers and lakes here as well? Because there's really not a lot we can do about some of the stuff because of the change in the jet stream and warming and everything else going on. I don't want to sound defeatist. Am I sounding? I think it's great that the stuff that you're doing. I'm just, all power to you. It's tough out there.
When we look at how we can adapt to climate change, and flooding is front and center, obviously, but there's many other factors we're going to have to consider. A lot of the processes that we're living with now come at the watershed scale. That's where the water cycle originates, and it doesn't respect municipal boundaries. So when we're looking at ways we might be able to put plans in process or in the works to adapt or change the way we're living in different parts of the watershed, we need to do it at that scale. And I'm not just talking about the trees and the wetlands now. I'm talking about our built infrastructure and potentially changes to local official plan policies even that make us not necessarily more consistent, but more in tune with the role that our various parts of the watershed play in the origins of flooding, or the roles that they play in wetland and forest management and things like that. And if we were looking at where the biggest bang for the buck is for spending money or resources or effort, you kind of need a watershed-based plan to fit all the pieces together. And if you imagine the watershed is a bunch of small chunks or pieces of a puzzle, each one of the pieces of the puzzle has a water budget associated with it. So up in parts north of Huntsville, where we have a lot of overburdened sand resources, soils may actually play a significant role in how water is moving through that part of the watershed, and concomitantly the slopes, geology underlying it, et cetera. So you have a water cycle in that little chunk. It might be a completely different water cycle than a piece down somewhere southwest of Bracebridge. And if we do modeling approaches at that watershed scale instead of right in the river, we can at least understand where our various corners of the watershed, what the factors are, and where it's more worth us spending money or resources or limiting development or land use alteration and things like that.
Go ahead.
Thank you. That's an excellent answer. Now I feel better.
Well done, Kevin. Councillor Wade.
Yeah. Here he goes.
Yeah, Jonathan will bring it back.
I'm wondering how much discussion you've had with some of the biologists and even planning professionals in the area, because over the years, being on the planning committee here, we often see files that come forward saying that a proponent wishes to build a little closer than what our official plan says to a wetlands or water body, but they almost inevitably bring forward a study or some sort of advice from a biologist that says if you take these mitigation measures, then it won't really have an adverse effect. I'm wondering how much communication, or if you're sensing a bit of a change in the approach from that side of the business as it relates to us.
First, I'd like to say that watershed plans have been done all over southern Ontario and in many parts of the United States and even in third world countries, but we've never done one here. We've never done a Muskoka one. And as to the sort of the biologist community, I think, again, in other parts of the province, there is that tool available in many municipalities when they're looking more at adapting to land development pressure, which we don't have quite the same way up here. However, there are subtle things going on that should be pointing us towards cumulative effects around our waterfronts and in other parts of the watershed. And we haven't, it's a science that's relatively difficult to employ, and it can be done through larger environmental assessment processes and within the realm of a watershed management plan. But we haven't really been doing it in Muskoka. I think there's an understanding of it and a willingness to do it. But again, this is a part of the bigger solution where we really need to get all the stakeholders, provincial government ministries, all the municipalities, and various stakeholder groups and business together at the same table. Because the watershed planning process allows us to put in measurable economic goals, social goals, and some of these ecological goals we're talking about. And when we look at anything we do that has a tendency to simplify an ecosystem, there's stuff that we barely understand that's going on, but that simplification of the ecosystem is having a negative effect for our built environment down the road. And so those are the kind of things that when we look at lake shores and the connection to inland forest areas, there are times when we do need to be looking more closely at how, not necessarily limiting everything, but how and where we do waterfront development.
Thank you, Kevin. It was an excellent report, great questions, and good answers. As always, thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Chair Clegg, thank you for being here. Take care. We'll move into council minutes. I have a motion moved by Dan Armour, seconded by Jason Fitzgerald. Be it resolved, the following council meeting minutes be hereby adopted as printed and circulated. That's May 27th, 2019, the regular meeting, and June 12th, 2019, that's the special council meeting. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's an error in the special meeting. It has me present, and I was overseas at the time, so.
We will correct that.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? All those in favor? It's carried. Some meeting reports to do. We have Huntsville Public Library Board, May 13th. Councillor Thompson, were you here for that, or were you away?
Your Worship, I was away, and I did try to contact Debbie today if she would at least send me some information so I could do some kind of a report. I haven't heard back from her yet, and I guess I probably won't be before the end of this meeting here.
So
I do know that the
So your report at the next council meeting will be quite lengthy.
Massive. It'll
Okay.
be massive, yeah. As you all are aware, I think the problem that they had, though, with the methane problem and the backup and so on and so forth has been addressed, and I just talking to Peter about that on the way in tonight, and so they're working on that still. I don't think it's completely out of the woods as of yet, but at least the library's open and people are using it, and our staff over there, I think, are feeling healthier than what they were there last month. Thank you.
Councillor Weed?
If I could just add that while you were away, Councillor Thompson, they've reinstated the interlibrary loans, and they'll be back active online on July 2nd.
True. I did.
Go ahead.
You're right. that information, but it's being limited to 5 a month, I think, is the loans, the loan situation is being limited now to 5 a month, I think is what the.
Per person.
Per person, yeah.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to downtown BIA. Deputy Mayor Terziano, anything to highlight from the BIA board?
Thank you, Your Worship. A few points of interest, not necessarily from the meeting attached to this, but the most recent one we had, and that's the upcoming Midnight Madness is July 19th. Everybody pretty much knows what that is, but that'll be happening downtown. The Beer Fest that happened at the end of May was a huge success, had 1,500 people at it. They raised enough money to cover expenses and put $5,000 towards streetscape and $5,000 towards a local charity to be determined, and $5,000 into a reserve for future years. A really interesting conversation happened at the BIA this week, which tied in nicely to Fred's report tonight, because one of our members, Catherine Cole, suggested that the town of Huntsville might want to be a leader in going plastic bag free. And they were talking about Huntsville being no plastic bags anywhere, and let's get into cloth bags. And they were talking about the cost of cloth bags are pretty high for each individual business, but if we could get into it as an entire town and buy in bulk, it might be something of interest. So anyways, at the meeting, both the BIA and the Chamber, Kelly Hayward's on BIA as well, and the Chamber both jumped in full force and said, we want to really explore this, and would the town be interested in being a third partner and at least exploring to see if we could do something like that. So I said I'd be happy to highlight it at council and get our council to start thinking about it, see what we can do. And one thing that was in the minutes from the meeting that's on the agenda was the update on the Muskoka Maple Fest, and that was in the news a bit, and there was some discussion about the $5 charge to come downtown, and there was discussion from the BIAs. They'd rather have some of the funds they provide to the Chamber go to offset that cost instead of having a charge in future years. So, as I said, Kelly's at the meeting, so she's well aware of that, and I think there'll be future discussion on that too.
Okay.
That's pretty much it.
Thank you. Any questions of Deputy Mayor Terziano? Councillor Withy.
Thank you, Worship. I've just noticed from the minutes, there's this whole little section here on ice rink. And it doesn't say where or how, and then it talks about rink board advertising. Like, are they putting up a huge arena or just a little?
No, it's still in the exploration stages, and they're hitting a few roadblocks. They wanted to put a bit of a skating rink down in Rivermill Park for the winter. They haven't sorted out all the bumps yet, so whether they will get sorted out or not, there's not a lot of flat area down there. So a lot of the discussion is, small rink boards, small advertising opportunities, but I'm not sure that it's going to happen. I'm not sure there's enough flat space, so we're still working on that.
Hence the bumps.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Your Worship. With regards to the Maple Festival, we can go back to that for a moment. I see where from the minutes and so on and so forth that there was a loss of about $1,000, I think it was, is what I'm reading here. Is this a situation where the municipal accommodation tax might be put into use to help, say, fund something like this, or at least grant money to something like this in future years?
Yeah, absolutely. If the board of the tourism entity chooses to support it that way, they can do that. Yeah, absolutely. Councillor Withy?
Thank you, Worship. Further to that, a question: are the vendors charged to operate in the Maple Fest?
Deputy Mayor Terziano?
I believe there's a charge to them, and I don't really want to speak to the budget of the Maple Fest because it's not a BIA event. It's a community event. I think it was initially spearheaded by the Chamber, but it's not even a Chamber event. So, but the information provided in the minutes, I think, came from Kelly, who probably is a member of the community group. So So there was some losses, but I'm pretty sure they said vendors are charged.
Just further to that, because I noticed here in the minutes, and I appreciate what you said about whose event it is, and it said they turned away like 50 vendors, and I'm thinking, well, there might be a place to make up that $1,000 or more, and see how that works. I appreciate the comment about flea market, but maybe they could pick or choose and deal with it that way. Because the streets weren't full of
Yeah, and
vendors.
I think, though, they're trying to keep it definitely a Muskoka maple event. So they want the vendors to be Muskoka, and they want them to be maple. So,
Okay. All right. Okay, we'll move on to the Aspen Community Hall Committee. Councillor Schumacher.
Yeah, so pretty much what you have read there is the update. Also, though, at the end, Ross did share information about an upcoming water walk this weekend. He, of course, has been through the official plan meetings talking about preserving Skeleton Lake. So if anyone wants to go first thing in the morning, it's starting on the 29th at 5 in the morning. Deanna Bomberry from Wissahickons First Nations is doing a sunrise water ceremony at 113 Long Point Road in Utterson. And of course, then the walk will go around through Rosso and whatnot, 70 kilometers for the whole weekend. They are doing like a GPS for people to follow. It's an all-nation Skeleton Lake water walk. Any other questions? Please ask.
Any questions of Councillor Schumacher? Okay, thank you for that. Committee of Adjustment, Councillor Fitzgerald, anything of particular excitement happen at Committee of Adjustment?
Was riveting one application that we dealt with, and we dealt with some old business, which turned out to be a simple transfer. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them.
Okay, any questions of Councillor Fitzgerald? Okay, Councillor Weeb, an update from the Huntsville Lake Bay's Chamber of Commerce.
Yes, Your Worship. It was actually a quick meeting. Kelly did a quick update on the office space that some of the staff are back in Town Hall. As you know, they were away for a while, and there were some renovations going on actually in the basement of Town Hall. But that's all done. It's all looking great, and some staff are back in there, so you'll see them now when you pass by here and there. The other small item we kind of discussed, and discussions are still ongoing, is the MAT, of course, the Muskoka, the accommodation tax. It's obviously on the top of mind for a lot of people as it's been rolled out. There's discussion, Kelly's been engaged with some discussion with some of our staff about the potential for assuming the administrative side of it. I know that the town has been charged with taking on that task until December 31st, but there's been some preliminary discussions about the chamber perhaps taking over that role and freeing up a little more time for our staff to expand the purview, is one way of putting it. Essentially, the Airbnb side of it is going to need a little more attention on how we kind of bring those providers into the fold and something that's equitable and fair. So it's going to require some more discussion, but more to come for sure. That's other than that, not much more to report.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of Councillor Weeb? Okay, great. It just occurs to me that we may want to do an update from the MAT board too, I guess. Since we have a discussion on that. Because that's something what you talked about related to administrative support for the MAT group. The MAT group's been talking a lot about that. So it just occurred to me now we shouldn't have a regular update from that group as well. So, yeah, thank you for that. They don't report directly to council?
Sorry, the board doesn't, but the updates do come, but if you would like the actual board, once they begin, they communicate there.
Well,
But that structure.
but the board has begun, that's why I suggested it.
The tourism entity,
Hasn't it begun?
very preliminary stage.
I thought that those were the committee meetings I was going to.
That's the working group. Is that
It's still the working group?
what-
You sure it's not the actual board?
I can follow up with staff.
I'm missing something. I thought it was the actual board.
Yeah, I can follow up with staff.
Okay. When it actually does start. All right. I thought,
I could be my mistake, Your Worship.
it's probably mine, let's be clear. Okay. We'll move on then to reports for adoption. We have a motion moved by Jason Fitzgerald, seconded by Dan Armour. Be it resolved that Operations and Protective Services Committee meeting minutes dated May 23rd, 2019, and the recommendations contained therein be hereby adopted as printed and circulated. Councilor Thompson?
Yes, I was here for that.
Yeah, I was going to say, you were here for that.
Just before I flew off. Yeah, a couple of interesting things came out of that meeting. One was a presentation that was made on behalf of the Capstone group. They were looking at a development on the corner of Haynes and Howland. And the request from the applicant was that ditching be replaced with culverts and so on and so forth. And I think the primary reason for that was for landscaping purposes and so on and so forth. I think they wanted to, make the area look prettier, because that building is, last time I looked anyway, the building is well underway. It's going to be turned into, this is the car wash, by the way, in case everyone's wondering. But there is an addition going on to the Howland Street side of that. And so anyway, the staff had recommended against it because they thought it's going to be problematic in the future, but the committee went against staff's recommendation on that, and we approved the recommendation. And the other thing I thought was very interesting, we had a winter operations update from our director, Mr. Hernan, and it was interesting doing a cost comparison this year to what actually it cost. Because, as you're all aware, we had a whole new system this year put into place with, the two shifts and that kind of thing. And I think Steve had extrapolated that if we'd gone this year with the kind of winter we had, if we'd gone with the same system last year, we would have spent about $500,000 more on operations than what we did this year. So it turned out to be not only financially a very, very good move for the town, but in terms of service, levels of service, we think it was quite an improvement in that area as well. So anyway, it was a great report. We're expecting a report from Staff Sergeant Graham at the last meeting. He was going to be coming to our meeting on Wednesday with regards to the impact climate change has had, in the last 5 years in terms of police calls and so on and so forth and that kind of thing. Unfortunately, I just heard from Steve that Staff Sergeant can't make it. He has to go to another meeting. So I'm looking forward to eventually getting that report as well. But by the way, that was something that Staff Sergeant volunteered on as you know, he started to attend our committee meetings now, and he volunteered to put a report together for us. So we're grateful for that. I'm looking forward to what the results of that would be.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. We have a motion moved by Jason Armstrong, seconded by Dan Armour. Be it resolved, the Community Services Committee meeting minutes dated May 23rd, 2019.
Sorry. Jason Fitzgerald.
Did I say Jason Armstrong? Oh, I'm thinking Armour. I'm reading Armour. Thank you for correcting me. If I could read it, it would make a big difference, but moved by Councillor Fitzgerald, seconded by Councillor Armour. Be it resolved that the Community Services Committee meeting minutes dated May 23rd, 2019, and the recommendations contained therein be hereby adopted as printed and circulated. Councillor Weed.
Thank you, Your Worship. Not too much happened at that meeting, but I do want to update you, and I encourage everyone to look through the minutes at the presentation that the Huntsville, or the Medill Church Preservation Society made. They came to the committee, and Carolyn McKay and Ann Collins did a presentation for us and walked us through some of the slides and some of the events that they're starting to have. It's early days for them, but they have a fundraising goal of about $70,000. They didn't they didn't come to committee asking for anything in particular, but they did want to let everyone know, and for obviously me to pass it along, that they're getting started, and they're a very passionate group about the preservation of this incredible building and the land surrounding it. So I'm sure we'll hear more from them in the future, but so far they just wanted to essentially make an introduction and let us know what they're getting up to. So it was really great, though.
Okay, thank you. Questions? All those in favor? It's carried. You'll be pleased to know that the clerk is writing everyone's name out for me now. That's fantastic. Thank you for that. Motion moved by Jason Fitzgerald, seconded by Dan Ira. Be it resolved, the Corporate Services Committee meeting minutes dated May 23rd, 2019, and the recommendations contained therein be hereby adopted as printed and circulated. Deputy Mayor Terziano.
Well, now that Brian Thompson just started yelling Campus Trail in my ear, I better highlight that we had a resolution to name the new road going into Fairburn, and actually there's an update on it on tonight's agenda, so I'm not going to dwell on that. The council might be interested to know, you remember that we decided as a council for our non-union staff to put them in at the 35 percentile, so we also decided at committee to put council in at the 35 percentile when we look at any raises. Probably the other big thing is, which made me very happy, staff recommended that we put our extra $600,000 that we got this year, kind of found money into a reserve, save it. So I was happy with that.
Okay, thank you for that. Any questions or suggestions on how she might spend that money? All those in favor? That's carried. A motion moved by Jason Fitzgerald, seconded by Dan Ira. Be it resolved, the Development Services Committee meeting minutes dated June 12, 2019, and the recommendations contained therein be hereby adopted as printed and circulated, and we should note that Councillor Withey has declared a conflict on one portion of that. Okay, Councillor Alcock.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll try and be brief. We had 4 zoning bylaw amendment applications, 3 of which we approved, 1 which we denied. One of the exciting ones was the proposed development around the Hospital of Greystone Project Management, Inc., which is for the new medical arts building as well as a residential building, a multi-residential. So that was pretty exciting. Much discussion around walking trails and that sort of thing. One of the ones that we denied was the application for some yurts that would be proposed on a residential area for tourist camping accommodation, and we just didn't think it was really compatible with the area. We had approved an amendment to our official plan for the addition of 29 residential lots in Port Sydney on South Mary Lake Road, off South Mary Lake Road, and lots of discussion around that. I should note that the approval came with lots of conditions as well for public walkways, pathways. There are a number of conditions, and that's in the report. We also had, sorry, I wanted to be fast. Councillor Thompson also made reference to the Capstone Ventures, Inc. on 10 Howland Drive, which was also at our committee for site plan approval, and it was approved at Development Services. We had a report from our Manager of Finance, Julia McKenzie, on removing any reference of affordable housing programs from our future development charges bylaw. But the corollary to that is that we have directed staff to proceed with the development of community improvement plan for affordable housing. So that was a good moment, I think good direction. We had a report from Scott Oval on looking at proposed private short-term accommodation rentals and including it in our municipal accommodation tax program. So we directed staff to report back to committee at our September 2019 meeting. And an interesting turn of events on our farmers market bylaw, instead of revising it, we decided to repeal it. We felt that it wasn't necessary, so I think everyone around the committee felt that was actually progress because it's less regulation as opposed to more regulation. And I think that's it for my report.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Councillor Thompson?
Not a question, but just a comment here. I'm going to, and I apologize to our clerk and the rest of council this, I'm going to declare a conflict with DEB 89-19. I'm sorry, Madam Clerk, I didn't recognize that earlier, so I will leave the table on this vote. Okay, thanks.
Okay. I don't know which one that is, but we'll figure it out. Yeah. Okay, any other questions or last minute conflicts? All those in favor? That's carried. Okay, gentlemen, you can come back.
Talking about my trip.
Okay, we're moving on to reports from municipal officers. I'm going to let you start, Madam CAO, and then I will read the resolution after.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council will remember that the developer for Craig Developments, Inc. was before us in March, making additional amendments to the current agreement, which we've been working on with the developer. Since that time, it has been noted that we do feel that there's further amendments necessary to the current agreement, and this strictly relates to security. So it is fairly outlined in the report about what's being proposed, but I'll just highlight what the developer is looking for. So currently, the agreement states that there was no securities to be registered on the property until such time as each phase was developed. So as noted in the report in March, there were securities of just over $550,000 applied to the property, and those were really related to soft construction costs. So in an effort to recognize the current securities, as well as additional securities that the developer would like to place on the property, it's our legal counsel's advice that we actually do an amending agreement and allow such securities to be registered not to exceed 80% of the value of the land. The developer had requested that we grant 90% in order for her to proceed with the development. But in discussions with the developer, she has indicated that she would be open to the 80% on the condition that any provincial funding was exempt. So in further discussions with our legal counselor on that, there's obviously a little bit of a risk with that because if the development were not to proceed, the province would still expect to get some type of equity out of the property. But that's certainly up for council's decision. The recommendation of staff is to stick with the 80% of all securities registered on the property. But council certainly has the ability to expand that by existing the provincial funding or increasing the securities up to 90%. So in summary, if there's any questions on the report, I'd be happy to answer those.
Okay, I'm going to read the resolution. It's moved by Jason Fitzgerald, seconded by Dan Eimer. Be it resolved that staff be directed to work with legal counsel to finalize an amending agreement to the Attainable Housing Agreement to permit for securities to be registered on the development land not to exceed 80% cumulatively of the appraised land value during the pre-construction and construction phases of development. And for that said amending agreement be completed to the satisfaction of the Chief Administrative Officer and the town's legal counsel. And further, that all legal costs for fees, disbursements, and applicable taxes be incurred by the town as a result of the amending agreement be borne by the developer. And further, the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign any necessary documentation related to the amending agreement. Questions? Deputy Mayor Terziano.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm trying to follow this as best I can. So I'm looking at the chart. So the current appraised value, I take it, is 1.6, but if we add another million in securities, are we not basically at the appraised value? I don't see how that's 80%. I might not be following it correctly, but.
Madam CAO?
To your worship. So that was the document that was provided by the developer. If council so chooses to do the 80 or 90%, then we would ensure that the assessed value of the land, that the amounts of securities did not exceed that. So those amounts would have to be adjusted.
So is that appraised value that's in that chart, is that a current appraisal, or is that just an estimate?
It is a current appraisal, and we do have the appraisal documents that state the zone, that the current appraised value.
So right now, the resolution before us is to only approve 80% of the 1.68.
80% of the appraised value. So as more development occurs in the property and as the assessed value changes, that percentage would also change. So the council should be more focused on the actual assessed value and the percentage for securities granted, as opposed to the actual numbers showing up in the document, because as the assessed value increases, then there'd be more room for securities to be added to the property.
Okay. And I guess just one other question. So I know that you've been dealing with our lawyer on this, and he's comfortable at 80%?
He is, yes. It was our recommendation of our legal counsel not to go any higher than 80%.
Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Your Worship. With regards to the third clause there, do we have an idea, through you to Denise, the cost of the legal costs, the cost of this amendment?
To your worship. So we don't have any idea what the legal costs are, but I think it's important to note that any legal costs incurred that relate to the amending of the agreement are borne by the developer of Craig Development, not the town of Huntsville.
Okay.
I can't imagine it'd be much more than a couple of $1,000s. It's a fairly
Yeah, I can't imagine. It's a
Minor amendment.
pretty minor amendment.
Okay, any other questions? All those in favor? That's carried. I have a motion moved by Jason Fitzgerald, seconded by Dan Emmer. Be it resolved, the Energy Conservation and Demand Management Plan is attached to Report CS 2019-24 be approved and submitted to the province in compliance with Ontario Regulation 507-18. Pete, do you have anything you want to highlight for us, or you just here to answer questions? Well, come on down and sit in the spotlight. We'll see if there's any questions for you. Any questions for Mr. Kingshot? Well, that's a good report. No questions. All those in favor? Thanks, Pete. That's carried. Okay, so now we're going to have a little follow-up on the proposed naming of the new road up by Fairburn. So this is report number Corp 2019-25, follow-up to proposed road naming Campus Trail. And Margaret is going to give us an update. Margaret, there she is, tucked behind Greg Pilling. Go on down, Margaret.
Thank you.
Just make sure you turn on that microphone. There you go, that's good.
Thank you. I provided the report as a follow-up to a question at committee and for information, so here to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Well, you sat around for a long time for nothing too then, didn't you? Well, thank you, Margaret. Clearly an excellent report.
Great, thank you.
Oh, wait a second. Deputy Mayor Terziano does have a question.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't have a question. I just want to clarify that Margaret didn't do all this follow-up for nothing. The question was about the length of the road, and you know, there were two sections to it, and were we naming only a section anyways? Councillor Withy asked the question and didn't like the length of the road, so, you know, it wasn't frivolous. Margaret followed up and provided the additional information, and I thank you for that.
Just very, very dutiful. Councillor Withy.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Margaret.
You're very welcome.
Listen, you're the second person to make Councillor Withy very happy tonight. That's good.
Very
Thanks,
good,
Margaret.
thank you.
Okay. Okay, moving on. Come on down, Julia. Well, a motion moved by Dan Armour, seconded by, I think these guys are the only ones that signed resolutions tonight. And I still can't read their names. Dan Armour, seconded by Jason Fitzgerald. Be it resolved that the prudent investor standard for municipal investments, next step, be received. And further, that staff undertake further due diligence to determine the best approach to move to the prudent investor standard and report back to Corporate Services Committee with a final recommendation. How would you like to give us a little highlight of prudent investor status and what that means?
So prudent investment status is, it's the opposite of the legalist, which we're currently under right now. To move to prudent investment, you have to qualify as a municipality, you have to have $100 million in investments or 50 million in net financial assets, which we don't have either of. But we can, our option is to join a joint investment board. So LAS and MFOA have joined together and created a company, One Investment, and that company is the vehicle for being our joint investment board. They can't be a member, but they're putting everything together. It can only be municipalities that can be members of this board. So they're looking for founding members to sit on this board to create enough money to be able to start it. So Huntsville is looking at being one of the founding members.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. Through you to Julia. Then who would some of the other founding members be, Julia, besides us?
So right now, everyone's still in the beginning stages, but in talks right now, it's Innisfil, Whitby, Clarington, York Region, Bracebridge, Thunder Bay, Kenora, and Muskoka.
Councillor Weeb?
Thank you, Worship. So how would they determine board members? Would it be treasurers like yourself, or how would it?
The actual investment board would actually be an investment board where it would be like CFAs, that's the right thing. So it would be similar to any other organization where you've got an investment board. They'd be paid members because they'd have to have that level of expertise. But part of being a founding member is having some representation on that board. So it would be one treasurer from the founding members that would rotate every 2 years on that board.
Call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Thanks, Julia. I have a motion moved by Dan Armour, seconded by Jason Fitzgerald. Be it resolved that the Town Hall Working Group workshop meeting notes summary dated May 10, 2019 be received for information, and for the Town Hall Working Group be approved to circulate a survey seeking citizen input, as well as to hold 2 open houses for our Town Hall tours, and for the Town Hall Working Group be extended to the end of 2019. That was our main motion. We have an amendment to that, moved by Jason Fitzgerald, seconded by Dan Armour. Be it resolved the following paragraph be added, and further that recommendation Corp 5-19 be amended to include the following individuals: Deputy Mayor Karen Terziano, Ingrid Armstrong, Crystal Beth Serreris, and Matt Huddlestone. So questions on the amendment first. We're going to add some people to that group. All those in favor of the amendment? That's carried. So the main motion as amended is moved by Dan Armour, seconded by Jason Fitzgerald. Be it resolved, the Town Hall Working Group workshop meeting notes summary dated May 10th, 2019 be received for information. And further, the Town Hall Working Group be approved to circulate a survey seeking citizen input, as well as hold 2 open houses and town hall tours. And further, the Town Hall Working Group be extended to the end of 2019. And further, the recommendation Corp 519 be amended to include the following individuals: Deputy Mayor Karen Terziano, Ingrid Armstrong, Crystal Beth Serreris, and Matt Huddlestone. Questions? All those in favor? That's carried. I have a motion moved by Jason Fitzgerald, seconded by Dan Armour. Be it resolved that staff be directed to extend the updated Club 55 lease as outlined in Report CS 2019-23 for an additional 5 years, and further the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign the necessary documentation. Mr. Pilling, welcome to the stage. Are there any questions of Mr. Pilling? Councillor Thompson?
Question, yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I guess the length of the term here, I know that we've had discussions in the past with regards to expanding various functions of the town hall here, and one of the areas that we talked about, of course, was Club 55. I hope none of them are watching tonight, because I won't be able to walk past the door if they hear what I'm suggesting here. But should we go 5 years on this until we know what we're going to be doing, or should we be looking at a year to year, or how should we look at this? Just question.
Craig, can you speak to the termination clauses in this agreement?
Yeah. Yes, thank you, through your worship. We added in 2 new clauses, one for a 6-month opt-out clause for the town and one for a 6-month opt-out for Club 55.
Any other questions? All those in favor? That's carried. Thanks, Craig.
Thank you.
We have a motion moved by, guess who? Councillor Fitzgerald, seconded by Councillor Emmer. Sorry. Be it resolved that council authorizes staff to proceed with replacing the town dock deck boards in an expedited manner with a treated wood product, and for the funding for this project of approximately $80,000 come from cash in lieu of parkland funds. Director Hernan,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
did you want to use the screen here to show
No,
some
no, I'm
pictures?
good that way,
Okay.
unless we need to, but as the report indicated, we've just become aware of the deterioration of the dock. It's hard to see from the surface, but if you go down and look and jump on boards, you can actually go through it. And that's why we wanted to expedite the process. There's some big events coming along this summer, and we're recommending the replacement with a pressure-treated material. We did look at composite decking, but because of the spans down there on 32-inch centers, the composite decking wouldn't work. It would be a major rebuild of the dock, and we're not looking at that at this point in time.
Okay, any questions? Councillor Withey?
Thank you, Worship. Treated wood in the water, is that environmentally safe?
This is the decking, it's not in the water, is it?
Well, it
It'll-
still has exposure to water.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, will splash into the water. Pressure-treated lumber, very common product used for docks like this.
But I understand you're not supposed to, even though it might be common that people do it. And, you know, next time there's a flood, it'll all be underwater. So, I mean, it is a concern. I don't know if there's, I know, for example, we were told in Algonquin Park to use hemlock or things like that that are more stable in and out of water. I'm just, pressure-treated water is basically a no-no as far as I've heard, unless there's a new product out there that isn't.
It is hemlock on there now, right?
It's Douglas fir.
Or Douglas fir, okay. And do we know why it's rotting so quickly?
What I've been told by some of the suppliers is that it's not a material that should be in and out of the water. Either submerge it in the water or leave it out of the water altogether. But basically, because the underside is splashing with water, it's in a high moisture area, they feel that's why. And when the boards rot and you pull them up and you look from underneath, you can see that they're all just rotted away.
So it's rotting from the bottom up?
From the bottom up.
Okay, Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question through you to Steve, and further to Councillor Withey's concerns with regards to that. But pressure treat today is not the pressure treat of 20, 30 years ago. I mean, at that time, I think pressure treat was, there was arsenic in the wood, or treated with arsenic or something like that. And with builders here that could probably help us more. But this material nowadays, I know every dock I've seen on my lake that's been replaced uses this wood for the dock, and I did the same thing myself actually last year when I replaced my dock. So this is not, this is safe wood to be using, I assume.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe you're correct, but I'll verify that again. I know all other town docks that we have are pressure-treated lumber too. Any of the floating docks you'll find are pressure-treated lumber as well.
They are.
I mean, cedar is another option, but it's a more money option.
I would imagine cedar would cost double that or more. Okay, Councillor Reid?
Thank you, Your Worship. Is there any talk about building the docks a little higher so that there's the chance of them being underwater ever, or is kind of nil, or?
So what we're proposing is to replace the deck We're not talking about touching the steel piles or anything down there. That's the foundation of the dock.
Yep.
If we decided to raise that dock, now we're into a major, major project, and that's not what we're proposing at this time. It's a redecking of the dock surface, going back on the existing piles, the existing steel structure which is under there.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Do you have pictures you could show us?
We've got a few pictures that we could show. We've got a,
Okay. Just following up on Councilor Reeves' comment, there's probably an opportunity to raise the level of the docks and eliminate this happening in the future just by getting it out of the water that, you know, whether it be 6, 8, 10, 12 inches in a normal step. But $80,000, if we think we're going to redo the structure, maybe we should come up with a temporary fix and look at the longevity and sustainability of just recoating it.
Councillor Withy.
Thank you, Your Worship. Is the rotting throughout, or is it, as I understood in a discussion somewhere else, that it was mostly where the boards are sort of near the shore, where there's, you know, some other material involved and things like that. I mean, is it universal throughout the entire structure, the entire deck?
through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it's throughout the entire deck. It was suggested to me, maybe it was on the backside where the soil was meeting up with the docks, and it's right out to the water side. It's throughout the one end of the dock to the other. If you walk it now, you'll see where we've been replacing boards on a regular basis. We had crews down there replacing boards a week ago. An elderly couple came along to watch the crew, and they sat down on the park bench to watch, and the park bench went through the dock.
Actually, I'm going to go to Deputy Mayor Terzian.
Thank you, Worship. Steve, the wood that's used then, the wood that's underneath, it's fine because it stays in the water, or is it the same type of wood that's rotting up top?
So I'll maybe defer to some of the other builders around the table, but if you take a wood product and submerge it in water, it won't rot. But when you take a wood product and submerge it in water and bring it out, and it's that deck board that's in and out of the water all the time, or the rim board around your dock, which is in and out, that's the one that rots in a quick way unless you use a product like a cedar or pressure-treated lumber or something to prevent that. But I mean, wood cribs in the water, they last forever. It's always the top log that rots away on you because it's in and out of the water. And what we're seeing is a premature rot on this deck for whatever reason. Was it bad material? Was there a problem with the material when we originally bought it? I don't know the answer to that, but 6 years later, we've got 2-inch boards that when you walk on them, you will fall through in certain cases. We have staff check the dock every day now, and we're replacing boards every day.
I guess my only concern was, you don't think when you rip the deck off to replace it, you are going to find more rot on the surface, because the water level raises and sinks and...
So without pulling the deck off to sea, but the majority of the structure underneath is made of steel. It's got steel piles in there, it's got steel beams. There's going to be some wood which is bolted to the steel where they fasten the deck to. May we find some of them rotted? We could very well find some of them, but the actual structure itself is a steel structure, so we're replacing the top deck.
Councillor Fitzgerald, then back to Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship. We had a similar issue at the Port Sydney dock, I believe, and what material do we use on there? I don't know. It seems to be holding up much better than what was there. So I agree with you that hemlock is not the right material for decking. And it sounds like we have an issue where we do have to expedite this, so it sounds like we don't have much of a choice.
Councillor Withy?
I think that Douglas fir was what is on there now. Hemlock actually is.
Yeah, you did say Douglas fir.
Yeah, so hemlock is actually good for in and out of water. The only problem with hemlock for decking is that you get splinters quite easily. I would like to know what the differential would be. I remain concerned about the treated wood around water, and do we have an estimate of what the cost of cedar or something else that is suitable that isn't chemically induced for this process?
I imagine we don't have a price.
I don't, no, we asked for a price on the pressure-treated lumber. You know, if it's council's wishes, I'd be happy to go back and maybe engage an architect and talk about raising the dock if you want and some of that stuff. My only recommendation is we've got some large events going on that we would just restrict them from doing those events on the dock.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Can make a motion to amend to an increase in price for cedar. It's about 20% more in the current market.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Thompson before I...
I'm just going to make an observation, Your Worship, that, you know, raising the dock 10 or 8 or 10, 12 inches or whatever, I mean, we just had a flood, I think, where the dock was underwater for, I don't know, several weeks at a time, I guess, and raising it 8 or 10 inches is not going to, we're not going to raise it above that level. Type of thing. So, and the other thing, I guess, too, if we were to raise that dock, I mean, what does it do to the boats that come in there to dock up to that? The finger docks are okay because they have a ramp to them, but the other ones that actually would dock at the dock itself would be a bit of a problem because now they're going to be 8 or 10 inches higher and your bumpers aren't going to work, type of thing. So.
Okay, Councillor Fitzgerald, you would like to entertain an amendment?
Yeah, I will put forward the motion that we accept 25% more for cedar decking material. Staff to proceed.
So, okay, we think it's, so we're going to have some numbers in this. We think it's 20% more, so we're thinking it's going to be another $20,000 roughly. Deputy Mayor Terziano? We're getting something drafted here for you.
What's the lifespan for cedar versus pressure treated?
Councillor Fitzgerald? Our resident expert.
They used to last for 25 years, both the products, but it's not old growth wood anymore. And the ozone layer and UV. So I've seen it last 23 years. I've seen it last 12 years. It just depends. I think cedar's a much superior product, and I think it's more environmentally friendly for this application, for sure.
Well, this is being drafted. Do we need it? Okay. How much money is in that park? There's $500,000 in that fund? Deputy Mayor Terziano?
Well, the other thing, if we're going to pay 20% more for the product, it's not 20% more than 80,000 because a lot of that is labor. So we need to know what the amount of product is. So if the product itself was $40,000, then we're only going 20% higher on 40,000, correct? Like, are we going to nail this down or just give a range?
Do you know what the breakdown is of labor and?
From one of the quotes we received, I just had it up here, it was about 33,000 in material.
Okay, so 20% more than that for materials then. What was the, okay, can I ask, I'm going to ask a question now, since everyone else had their chance. What was the old dock? I mean, I realize it lifted off the cribs, but what was there seemed to last for an awfully long time. Was it old growth cedar? Councillor Fitzgerald?
Yes, Your Worship, I believe it was.
Okay. So we're not finding any old growth cedar anywhere. Go ahead.
I guess before we nail down any numbers or percentages, you got 3 bids, and that was the lowest bid you went with?
Correct.
I would stick with the 20 and know that Director Hearn is going to do his best to bring the job in under budget, and then we're not sitting back at this table for a project that needs to be expedited, so.
Okay. All right, we have an amendment? I have a mover. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Withey. So moved by Jason Fitzgerald, seconded by Tim Withey. Be it resolved that paragraph 1 be amended by replacing treated wood product with cedar wood product. You just want cedar, right? It's not a wood product. Okay. And paragraph 2 be amended by replacing 80,000 with 100,000. I guess that's probably not quite accurate either. We don't think it'll be $100,000, do we?
I'm comfortable with that motion.
On the materials. So what should the number be? The materials is, I'm sorry, how much is materials?
30.
All right, we're going to take a 2-minute break, and we're going to do some quick math here, instead of the public watching us all look like idiots.
Before we take the break. Your
What's
Worship,
that?
Before we take the break, if this needs to be expedited, and we may have to go through another cycle or call a special council meeting. So surely we have faith in Director
All right, so
Hernan
here's what we're going to do
to
then.
bring
The
this in
motion,
on
the
budget.
motion will read that the funding for this project not exceed $100,000. Can you make that change? All right, moved by Jason Fitzgerald, seconded by Tim Withy. Be it resolved that paragraph 1 be amended by replacing treated wood product with cedar, and paragraph 2 be amended by replacing 80,000 with not to exceed $100,000. Questions? All those in favor? Those opposed? Those indifferent? That's carried. Okay, thanks. That was the motion to amend, yeah. Main as amended. So, yeah. Okay, so the main motion, as amended, now reads, moved by Jason Fitzgerald, seconded by Dan Armour. Be it resolved, the council authorizes staff to proceed with replacing the town dock deck boards in an expedited manner with cedar wood. And further, the funding for this project of approximately $100,000 comes from cash in lieu of parkland funds, not to exceed $100,000. All those in favor of the amended motion? My goodness, thank you. It's carried.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
World of Technology, the old dock was 3-inch hemlock. So somebody else thought it was, so it was 3-inch hemlock. That's the old dock.
So can you look into 3-inch hemlock while we're at it, I guess? Okay, Steve, come on back. We're going to get you to do a verbal update on the King William Street Improvement Project, please.
So I think most of it has been reported, Mr. Mayor. The district has, through their working groups that they've had and the business meetings they've had, a contractor has been selected. JB Enterprise has received the contract, and they will be moving in on site probably before the end of this week. We'll start to see them moving in with their trailers. They're starting at the Main Street Bridge, and we'll be working out towards King William. The project has now become a 2-year project. The first phase will go up to Can Street, and then it'll be paved over for the winter, and then they'll be back early next spring to finish from Can Street up to Scott Street. And they figure they'll be out of here by end of June next year. So that's where it sits. They are using the little parkette down by Tim Harden's for construction trailers, and that park it will be restored to its site that you see now. And we do have a report this week going to the Operations Committee dealing with the request of the left-hand turn lane.
Right, okay. Great. The, I take it that the section from the bridge out to Can Street, particularly right in front of, I guess just before Church Street there, that is the deepest section of the digging. They're going to have to dig pretty deep through there, right?
That is correct. That is the deepest excavation down through that area there.
Right, okay. Deputy Mayor Terziano.
Thank you, Your Worship. Steve, do you know whether they're going to maintain traffic both ways, or what they decided on that?
So there will be traffic 2 ways. Some of it will be on a one-way street, but it's controlled with traffic and traffic lights. But on weekends, they say they'll have 2-way traffic going. And then when they travel from Can Street down to Chafee Street, they're going to be using some of the back streets, if you will, and behind the Kentucky Fried Chicken, down Can Street to move some vehicles around too, to help traffic moving back and forth.
It's going to be a real pain. It's got to be done. Any other questions about any of that? Okay, thank you, Director Herner.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to bylaws. I have a motion moved by Nancy Alcock, seconded by Dan Armour. Tim, you don't have to leave for this one. And nobody has to leave anymore. Our new procedure bylaw, you can sit here, but just sit back. Roll yourself back. Now, Councillor Thompson, you do have a pecuniary interest on one of these. So just, it's number 2019-62. Is that the one? 1901364 Ontario Inc. Rezoning, 450 Muskoka Road 39. Okay, so just roll yourself back there and try not to make any facial expressions. Okay, I have a motion moved by Dan Armour, seconded by Jason Fitzgerald. Be it resolved that bylaw numbers 2019-52 to 2019-65 inclusive be reported and read a first, second, and third time and finally passed this 24th day of June 2019. Questions? See how we're doing this differently now? All those in favor? That's carried. You noted that Councillor Thompson had a pecuniary interest in that one. Okay, next one. Councillor Withy, you can roll back now. Motion, no, back. Councillor Thompson, you can come back forward. Our new procedure bylaw is really smooth so far, but anyhow. Okay, I have a motion moved by Nancy Alcock, second by Dan Armour. Be it resolved that bylaw numbers 2019-66 to 2019-68 inclusive be reported and read a first, second, and third time and finally passed this 24th day of June 2019. And be it noted, Councillor Withy has a conflict on each of these. Questions? All those in favor? All those opposed? That's carried. Come on back, Councillor Withy. Okay, moving on to previous business. I have a motion moved by Karen Terziano, seconded by Jonathan Weeb. Whereas the provision of a full range of core hospital services, including acute care, inpatient, emergency, diagnostic, and surgical services at both the Huntsville District Memorial Hospital and the South Muskoka Memorial Hospital in Bracebridge by Muskoka Algonquin Healthcare is vital for all the communities in the Muskoka region and the East Perry Sound area. And whereas the continued delivery of those core hospital services at both the Huntsville District Memorial Hospital and the South Muskoka Memorial Hospital in Bracebridge is crucial to the long-term sustainability and economic vitality of the communities in the Muskoka region and the East Perry Sound area. And whereas the residents of the Muskoka region and the East Perry Sound area have strongly supported multi-site delivery of a full range of core hospital services, including acute care, inpatient, emergency, diagnostic, and surgical services at both the Huntsville District Memorial Hospital and South Muskoka Memorial Hospital in Bracebridge. And whereas following extensive community consultation and careful study, engagement, and evaluation of potential models for the hospital services in the future, the Board of Directors of Muskoka Algonquin Healthcare endorsed the recommendations of MAC's Capital Plan Development Task Force for a 2 acute site model for hospital services. And whereas Muskoka Algonquin Healthcare is continuing the development of a Stage 1 submission to the Health Investment Capital Branch of the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care for approval for MAC to continue on to the next stages in the lengthy capital planning process. And whereas the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care for the Province of Ontario requires a community contribution or local share toward the capital costs of hospital expansion or new hospital construction. Now, therefore, the Corporation of the Town of Huntsville resolves as follows. 1, that the Province of Ontario, through the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care, be requested to support the continued delivery of emergency health care services and inpatient care at the 2 acute care sites in Huntsville and Bracebridge. 2, that the Province of Ontario, through the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care, ensure that the changes to Ontario's healthcare delivery system currently being implemented do not negatively impact access to services and the quality of care in Huntsville, Bracebridge, and the East Perry Sound area. 3, that the province of Ontario, through the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care, ensure that the changes to Ontario's healthcare delivery system currently being implemented recognize the unique and important role that smaller hospitals such as the South Muskoka Memorial Hospital and the Huntsville District Memorial Hospital have in promoting economic development and creating sustainable communities in Ontario. 4, that consistent with recommendations from the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, the province of Ontario, through the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care, be encouraged to reform the funding formula to ensure that base funding provided to hospitals recognizes the diverse models for hospital operations, including small, rural, and multi-site hospitals. Tie provincial base hospital operational funding at least to inflation annually. Provide adequate capital and operational funding to hospitals to support the services that residents need in their communities. Remove, or at very least cap, the community contribution or local share expected of local municipalities toward the capital costs of hospital expansion or new hospital construction. Ensure that the capital planning process for hospitals leverages the significant municipal investments in existing or planned local infrastructure. Respect the importance of municipal plans and policies. Recognize key factors such as land use planning, community economic impacts, the ability to raise funds, operational and cost impacts of long-term plans for hospitals, and the direct impact on local healthcare providers when approving hospital capital plans. 5, that the Huntsville Hospital Foundation and the South Muskoka Hospital Foundation be requested to identify specific targets for fundraising that can be used collectively to support hospital expansion or new hospital construction in Huntsville and Bracebridge, and that the funds raised by the local hospital foundations be recognized as a portion of the community contribution or local share expected of local municipalities toward the capital costs of hospital expansion or new hospital construction. 6, that after exhaustion of other funding sources, the provision of a community contribution or local share by the town of Huntsville toward the capital costs of the hospital expansion or new hospital construction be endorsed. 7, that Muskoka Algonquin Healthcare's local share working group continue deliberations to identify a specific target for the financial or in-kind contribution by the corporation of the town of Huntsville to support the capital costs of hospital expansion or new hospital construction. And 8, that the municipalities in the Muskoka region and the East Perry Sound area initiate appropriate internal financial planning to identify appropriate methods to fund the financial or in-kind contributions required to support the capital costs of hospital expansion or new hospital construction to serve the Muskoka Algonquin healthcare catchment area. Questions? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just with regard to number 6, that after exhaustion of the other funding sources, the provision of a community contribution or local share by the town of Huntsville, is there a reason why the town of Bracebridge is not mentioned in this as well?
The town of Bracebridge has a remarkably similar sounding resolution in front of them as well. So they'll do the same, they have the same resolution basically.
So they would have the town of Bracebridge in number 6 as opposed to what we have here.
Yeah, we'll be circulating this to the municipalities of East Perry Sound as well. I've spoken with all the, the mayors and rees and on the hospital committee, I guess, that they've got working there, and they have all acknowledged that they will, they'll want to play a role in this as well, that, they might not be able to make the same sort of size of contribution that some of the municipalities of Muskoka can make, but they recognize they need to be part of it, so they have the resolution as well.
And I like the fact that not only the town of Bracebridge, Huntsville, but also communities of East Perry Sound are included in this resolution, so thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Withy?
I'm not sure if this is significant, but in the whereases, there was a lot of mention, you don't have to flip back, there was a lot of mention of...
when you're talking?
Well, it was sort of through there in a few places, there was a lot of mention of surgical services.
Right.
And when you get to number 1 in the be it resolved, it just said, it isn't there. And I'm wondering if it's important that it should be in there, where it says health services. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't know it's more important to be in that section of the motion than in a whereas, because that of course, I think is a big issue for our community, for both, but I think more so ours.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Thank you for raising it. Yeah, I'm gonna, so the acute care inpatient emergency. So can we draft an amendment that actually just sort of uses the same language that's there in the first whereas here? Okay? We'll draft that. Thank you. Good catch. That's impressive. Okay, anyone else? I was really hoping someone else would have a question while we draft that amendment, but Councillor
I'll fill the air. Thank you, Your Worship. There's the mix of language in one of the bullets that says remove or at very least cap the community contribution. Depending on what that contribution is demanded of us, it could be very prohibitive. So removing it and capping it can be very different things. If we don't know what the cap would be, I just wonder if we could explore that a little bit.
I'm trying to find that language exactly. Where was it? Oh,
So there's
here
a
it is.
bullet, yeah.
Remove or at very least cap the community contribution or local share. Expected political cost. Okay, sorry, and what is your comment again?
Well, I think that depending on what we're capping it at, that could be very different. That could be a very different feeling around the community compared to removing it.
Right. So the current contribution expected of local municipalities is 10% of the capital costs, but there's a lot of provisos to that. So that's 10% of the capital costs that the province funds. Well, they don't fund things like, you know, parking lots and equipment and furniture and stuff like that either, right? So, so the 10% can wind up being of the total cost of the project a little more than that, which is the fear. So, in many ways, this motion is also intended to express to the province that, you know, a place like Vaughan with a massive, certainly commercial and industrial tax base probably has a little more propensity and ability to raise the 10+% in their community than, say, we would here in Muskoka. So we're trying to get the province to recognize that we're not all Vaughan, we're not all Oakville, right? So, Councillor Whitty?
Thank you, Worship. May I suggest a further amendment to the amendment?
Now's the time.
Under number 1 in the resolution.
Yes.
Could we add something to the effect of where it says support acute health care and the other amendment we're making, I would like, if we could, to put fair and equitable in there between the sites in a fair and equitable manner, perhaps at the end of that clause.
So if we use the same language that we have, the full range of core hospital services, including acute care, inpatient, emergency, diagnostic, and surgical services at both, do we still need to put fair and equitable in there?
I think it's important to be in both places, quite frankly, because that can,
So
to
amending
make
the
sure that
first
we're
whereas?
we're in a balanced situation. I think it's important.
Anybody else while we, see, now we gotta get someone else to talk for a little bit.
I can keep talking if you
Okay, no,
want.
you be quiet for a minute. Great. Okay, so I'm just reading here. So right after services, but put the word equitably. So Counselor Withey, are you saying that after, so inpatient care, emergency diagnostical surgical services at the 2 acute care sites in Huntsville and Bracebridge? Where would you like us to say in a fair and equitable manner, somewhere in there? It's kind of it's a bit clunky wording, I must say.
How about just equitable?
So, okay.
If it sounds.
Why don't we say the continued equitable delivery? Okay, so we're right after continued before delivery, right, equitable there.
That sounds.
Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay. In red. Okay. Okay, so we'll just clarify that. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so I have a motion moved by Tim Withey, seconded by Councillor Jonathan Weed. Be it resolved that the, sorry, you actually moving, you wanted to ask a question. That the following words be added to point number 1 after the word continued. We're adding the word equitable. And the following words be added to point number 1 after inpatient care, the words emergency, diagnostic, and surgical services. Okay, any questions on the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment? Okay. Do I need to read the whole thing again as amended? Okay, thank goodness for that. Any other questions on the amended motion? All those in favor of the motion as amended? That's carried. Thanks, everybody. I thought someone was going to say yes. Thank you. Okay, I'm getting into general information. Council correspondence there from May 23rd to June 14th, if anyone's interested in that. We want to give you a little update to the District of Muskoka update. So I'll go around the table. Who'd like to go first? I'm looking at you, Councillor Withey.
Thank you, Worship. We met last Thursday morning. Well, we had a couple meetings. We had a joint meeting of Corporate Services and the Health Committee. Do you want
to do that one? You do that. You do that one. People hear enough out of me, so.
Essentially, the gist of this meeting was to discuss Fairburn and what's going on with that, with the redevelopment, and how we're going to move that forward. The province released more long-term care beds, and Fairburn immediately applied for more. We had attained approval for 96 beds. There's now new applications in for 128 or 160 because they always have to be a multiple of 32 beds to be sustainable. So in order to fund that construction, because the $10.5 million that we got out of the district to do that before are now, that number's obviously going to be increased. So how do we get there? The decision was to hire a consultant to work with getting that through. The conversation continued to talk about overall hospital funding and where the money that the district has pledged, where that goes and how that gets expanded or contracted into the future. So there's lots of discussion about that, about responsibility of which level of government, et cetera, et cetera. Health Committee on the Thursday morning, we had Dr. Gardner come in from the Simcoe Muskoka Health Unit, who again talked about the reason we need to stay in Simcoe Muskoka, which I vehemently opposed for a number of reasons, having sat in both camps where we were the north before and now the south. I don't think it's wise for us to be part of a territory that includes North York. In fact, North York has said they don't want us. And why not go north where we were before, where we're a bigger fish in a, well, territorial, a bigger pond, but with, and having sat on that District Health Council from 98 to 2004, I think it's beneficial for us. And it may just get Muskoka back into Northern Ontario status, which would help a lot of people in our neck of the woods. So I appreciate Dr. Gardner's work. I think he's great at what he does. I think that to petition the province to stay looking southward, I don't think is to our benefit. So.
Okay, any questions of Councillor Withey? Just following up on that, I'm going to step in and just give a quick update too on Fairburn, specifically the meeting that Chair Klink and I had with Ministry of Health officials relating to getting more beds for Fairburn. He and I went down and met with the Senior Policy Advisor to the Minister of Health. It was a very good meeting. And then within a few hours, she had coordinated an opportunity for us to have a meeting actually with the Assistant Deputy Minister, who is effectively the CAO of the ministry, of long-term care, which is more specific. And that meeting was supposed to happen late last week on Thursday, but then they shuffled the cabinet, so our meeting got shuffled out. So I don't know, we're working on putting that together. It's coming up, I think, in another couple of weeks. So Chair Klink and I will be going back down again. We've been invited back down. So probably the best news from that discussion, though, is that of the 6,000 to 6,500 beds that the province wants to have allocated for construction and get started this year, not quite half of them have been allocated. So our timing in terms of asking for an extra, 60 or so beds here is right on time. So it's good. And we've pointed out to them that the building is, ready to go any moment. So we need to know now. So it was a good meeting leading to yet another meeting. So anyhow, I wanted to give you an update on the heels of Councillor Withey's update. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Worship. With regards to that, a couple of questions I have, I guess. I mean, I think the original plan at Fairburn was to have a 96-bed facility. And so the infrastructure and the size of the building and everything was sort of geared to that. I am assuming the infrastructure would accommodate doubling the size of that if that was necessary. But what about the size of the building? I mean, the building envelope, is there still going to be enough property up there to accommodate it much larger?
They can go up.
They would go up as
Yeah.
opposed to out?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, 160 beds seems to be, and Councillor Withey can probably speak to this as well, but it seems to be kind of the magic number to make something sustainable in terms of generating enough revenue from, residents that are there and funding from the province. Anything smaller than that, you're kind of living on a shoestring, and it's tough to make it work, so. Okay, so the next committee at District, Councillor Alcock.
Okay, we had two Community and Planning Services Committee meetings. One was a last-minute emergency that had to go to council last week, and it was approval for our Ontario Works Services Plan and Ontario Works Program Service Plan, as well as Ontario Works Addiction Service Plan approval. And one of the things, the ministry, very last minute, wanted us to get the plan in by the end of the month. And it was also in response to a proposed deletion of provincial funds towards our addiction services program. So we had to adjust what we had done before, and we did do that. We adjusted internally because we felt that our addiction services program was really important to what we do, so we found the funds internally. And that received approval at council. As far as our regular Community and Planning Services Committee, we had a deputation request. She didn't show up, but we did discuss a request for funding from the Muskoka Victim Services. And they made the request to the district for the support of $30,000 over 3 years, so $10,000 per year, which we approved because the work that they do really overlaps quite extensively with our homelessness programs, and we've relied on their services quite extensively in a number of our emergency services. So we endorse that. We also, I don't know if I mentioned on June 5th, we did have a very successful event looking at affordable housing, and so it was the creation of our district-wide community task force. And the first task force meeting, I believe, will be July 12th. So one of the items that came to our community services meeting was the proposal to have a short-term contract position, which will be from within, and that because it is from within, we have to offset costs for that position. So we approved that because, as all municipalities have said, looking for solutions to our affordable housing issue is very important. We received approval from the province in the amount of $561,300 to go for the Canada-Ontario Community Housing Initiative. So we had to amend our budget to reflect that approval, and the district will be going out as soon, once the district council approves this, with proposals from the community to match that $561,000. The one difference with this program funding approval is the province wants us to have a signed deal in place by the end of this year. So that gives us 6 months to find appropriate projects, and I know that the mayor and I have been talking about one in particular. So we'll follow up hopefully next month. But the caveat is that the agreement has to be in place by the end of this year, which is really fast. It's much faster than we've done before. The district will be going out, if the district official plan is approved by the end of this week. There's a hope that it will be by the province. The timeline was extended once. They're thinking that it won't be extended again, and it will be approved. If it is, then the district will be going out with a public meeting on the town of Huntsville's proposed urban boundary changes with respect to Huntsville Hidden Valley and the Huntsville Highlands boundaries, which we had approved here locally, and they did at the district, but it has to go out to the public. So that, we said, okay, go do that. We received funding from Service Canada for the Muskoka Watershed Council's Love Your Lake program. So we had to adjust our budget to approve 2 summer students. We agreed to hire a consultant to develop a transportation needs assessment and growth and sustainability plan, because we did in fact receive grant funding in the amount of $699,786, so close to $700,000. But there are a lot of different pieces in the overall transportation planning with respect to the district. If you look at the Corridor 11 bus, you look at our local bus systems. So we want to look at the overall program needs and try and come up with something that makes sense to spend that $700,000. That's not all for the consultant. We actually had, in our grant application, we had up to $50,000 to spend on a consultant. So that was part of it. And I think that was the bulk of our meeting.
Any questions? Councillor Whitty.
Thank you, Worship. I was wondering if there was any update on those pieces of land that were taken out of development status in our maps. I know the one at the south end of town was put back in, but was there any news about the other 2 pieces, one being Club Link and one being Huntsville Downs area? What's the status on that? I know that the province had put a hold on what the district had done, and I just don't know what the result of that was.
Councillor Alcock.
Okay, I can answer part of that, and the part is around Club Link. We approved a number of changes that Club Link had requested, but not all of them. So we've incorporated parts of the property around their existing development that would allow them to build more sort of resort residential development, but they wanted to extend their boundaries towards our existing urban core, and we said no, because that was encouraging more sprawl, which is not what we were looking for in our official plan. So they're happy with some of the changes that were made, but not all of the changes. On the, what was the other one? Sorry, Councillor Withy?
Council Downs.
Huntsville Downs?
I don't think we made changes with respect to that.
Yeah, it was. It was taken out of the development
it wasn't
areas.
put
Oh,
back in, I think.
It
yes,
wasn't put back in.
we didn't put it back in.
Is that, but I understood that the province was
But it is still held up by the province, yes.
still held up by the province because it was just it arbitrarily happened without any real reason other than,
Is Kirsten here? Could I ask, can I throw this one to Kirsten Maxwell, because I'm probably entering into deep water here.
Kirsten, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Councillor Withy.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do believe that Huntsville Downs was considered to not require an official plan amendment at the district level anymore because they own lands that directly abut service properties. But we can definitely follow up and confirm.
Okay. We're moving on. Councillor Thompson, have you got an update for us?
I do, even though I did miss that meeting, but thanks to Tanya, I do have a bit of a report, and I did have a chat with Commissioner Yon as well. The meeting was held just before the district council meeting last Monday, and it was a very short meeting, but the one contract came out of it, and that had to do with the District of Muskoka Recyclable Materials Processing Contract. It was awarded to Waste Connections of Canada for a 3-year term and based on unit prices and subject to an annual escalation of adjustment of 3%. And then in future reports and actions, a couple of them I find rather interesting. Some of them have been due, but they've been put off and extended and postponed until the third or fourth quarter of this year. But one that, a couple of them here that I find are going to be interesting to look at is contract bonding options. I find that sort of intriguing. Whether they're going to go to pre-qualifying or bonding or how they're going to do that, I'm not sure, or options of. And the other one is Public Works Staffing Direction for Organizational Structures. I'm not exactly sure what that's about, but it'll be an interesting topic when it comes up, but that'll be coming up in the third quarter, so we should be having something on that, I guess, anytime starting next week. That's just about it, Your Worship. Thanks.
Okay, any questions? Councilor Thompson? Okay, so I can give you a quick update on the Finance and Corporate Services Committee, where we had a report from our auditors and a review of the audited statements. We had a review of our reserve funds, which are in healthy shape at the district. We had 3 recommendations related to budget guidelines for water and wastewater, solid waste management, and the general tax levy. We actually, every one of those, we reduced. The water and wastewater urban service levies, the user fee. So we set a budget guideline of 3.2%. We reduced that to just under 3. I can't remember the exact number. Solid waste management, we reduced a little bit as well to just under 5, and budget guideline for the tax-supported operating that levy, we reduced that from 4.5 to 3. We reduced it pretty dramatically. So we did that. We bought some backhoes. We've started the process for the elimination of the vacant and excess land reductions. I know that we've had that discussion here, but these things are managed by the district on behalf of all of us. So the province has eliminated it for the education portion and are permitting us to do it as well, but we have to go through a month of public consultation, unlike the province, so anyhow. Apparently, the region of Waterloo did the exact same thing, and I think in the month they got 14 comments. So based on that ratio, we might not get half a comment. So anyhow, we'll see what happens. We've also, we authorized the pilot of a reduced securities requirement. There's a developer, I've forgotten the name of it now, Loon Call Developments, that's done a couple of projects in Bracebridge and Gravenhurst. They've usually have an affordable element to their projects. They've asked for an opportunity to reduce the required securities on their own lands. So full 100% securities for any work they have to do on public lands, but the work they have to do on their own land, they've asked for a reduced security. And so we approved that, and also directed staff to look at a policy across the board, so that it makes it just a little bit cheaper for people to develop, which we thought was a good thing. And I think that was all that was of particular interest there. District Council was kind of uneventful too. We did approve the tender for King William Street. Other than that, there was nothing terribly exciting, I don't think so. Are there any questions about any of those? Seeing none. Exceptional. Oh, MTO meeting. Just so everyone is aware, that MTO meeting refers to the sort of the regional meeting with the Northeast Region Director for the MTO, Eric Deutsch. Following up on the number of sort of great meetings we've had with Eric and his team, we facilitated an opportunity for the MTO to meet with all the municipalities in sort of Parry Sound and East Muskoka, through the corridor basically. Just because we all deal with the MTO a lot, and we've had a great relationship with Eric, and so we hosted a meeting of all those areas, and it was really successful. The ministry staff really appreciated it. They gave an update on sort of projects for this summer that were coming up, and each of the municipalities, a couple of municipalities actually had some questions about things that were in their communities, and it was just generally a good idea, and I think everyone appreciated it. So there's, you know, Huntsville playing a leadership role again, so it went really well. And I think the goal is to do it every 6 months or so. There's a Muskoka Pride flag raising on July 22nd at 11:15 in the Civic Square. That's coming up. And that's all I have for general information, unless anybody else has something. Anything else? Okay. So we're going to go into closed session for a number of items. We're going to take a quick recess for Cogeco to clean up their stuff, and we'll let them get organized. Thanks, everybody.